hey, this is Rafael. I want to add my 2 cents or a different perspective of this scenario of employees that are underperforming. You might want to save this video for later because it's going to be a little lengthy one. So here's the thing. I'm going to make a couple assumptions that you've did all the work up front to follow up, set expectations, set goals, and manage their performance based on KPIs. If you don't know what KPIs are, go into my stance store. Now, doing all that, right? One is the employee should not be surprised of how they're performing overall. It shouldn't be a surprise. If you did all the work up front, they should know, hey, I know that. I know as an employee, I'm underperforming. Okay. So the second thing is the question then becomes how you handle confrontation, because at some point you're going to have to confront an employee that's underperforming. Now, and here's the reality is that many managers avoid confrontation because one, they don't like it, they fear it, they do everything can to avoid it because one, they didn't do all the due diligence up front to do the work, and it becomes a surprise to the employee when you actually have the conversation with them. That is the number one reason why managers avoid confronting employees based on their performance, because they didn't do all the work up front. That's why it's so important to do all the work up front. So when you get to this point, it becomes a normal conversation. All right. So you get to this point, the key thing, again, you assess how you like to confront. And if you want to, I always suggest write everything down based on objective data, based on KPIs, their goals, the current assessment of what they're doing, and some key things of what they've missed so far, like their mistakes, quality, whatever those things are around that, and some ideas that you may have to improve that process based on your own observations. So good. So once you set up that meeting, you can say, hey, employee, I wanted this means really to follow up and put things on paper so we can help you meet the current objectives. And the goal of the response is saying, hey, boss, I absolutely agree with you. I know you provided enough feedback when you're out there following up, and I absolutely have implemented some of those things that you've talked about when you follow up with me so I can get better at what I'm doing. That's what you want to hear because you've done all the work up front. Then you just continue the conversation saying, okay, what are some of the ideas that you've come up with that you can commit to so that I can help you implement those to meet your objective? And they can say, hey, these are the 2 things that I've done or 3 things. Okay, great. And the other question then becomes, hey, what's the time frame do you think that you can make those improvements to meet the objective? And that's going to be their commitment to saying, if they say 3 months, 2 months, you're like, no, that's too long. You want to create a sense of urgency and say, hey, what about shorter than that? Because I want to make sure that we meet that objective at a reasonable pace in order for us to get away from this, that you're meeting objectives. Then you as a manager have to make a decision whether or not 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, 3 months, depending on the skill set, it's okay. That's going to be all on you. So at the end of the meeting, you're like, okay, we'll say 30 days. Okay, within 30 days, you've got to make 2 improvements. This is a delta. Great. That sounds like a plan. Do you agree? The employee says, yeah, absolutely. Then the other question then becomes, okay, this is my commitment as a leader to you to follow up. This is my frequency follow-up that I'm going to do with you so I can give you enough guidance and feedback so you can make an improvement. And the employee's like, okay, great. I love that. But here's the thing. Here's the kicker. When you do that follow-up, it's critical that you stick to that commitment. Critical that you stick to the commitment. Not only that, it's very important that you provide honest feedback in those moments to say, you're not meeting expectations, you're not meeting the goal. Because within 30 days, you've got to make a decision. Remember, within the 30 days, you've got to make a decision if you're doing this correctly. So the other example scenario where an employee disagrees with what you're saying, because you can do the same thing, prepare the agenda, list out the objectives, and the same thing we talked about, list all the objectives in that so you can be prepared for the conversation. Because the employee can easily say, I don't agree with it, and they can deflect, and they're going to deflect if they don't agree with it, because you might be in a scenario, more than likely, that the employee is not aware of this situation. You still got to confront, right? You still got to do your job in making sure that you're providing feedback. If you haven't done it up front, then you're going to be in a scenario where you're meeting with the employee and providing feedback right there and then. And they're going to be surprised, deflect, do all these things, and you got to reel them in. Now, this is where your micromanagement tactics have to kick in, because it's important that you understand how to micromanage as well. Not that you're a micromanager, but you got to know when to deploy it. So in this scenario where the employee's deflecting and they disagree and they're making all these excuses, that's where you come in and say, hey, this is a goal. This is your current trend based on performance. And this is what needs to happen. These are the two opportunities that I suggest that you do. When you ask the same questions, what are your suggestions about how you make improvements? And they may deflect, they may not own anything, because at the end of the day, maybe they don't own anything and they're just blaming everybody. Then all you're saying is that, hey, these are the two suggestions I suggest. This is what I want you to implement so that you can make improvements. Then what I'm looking for is making improvements within 30 days. And at the end of 30 days, we're going to assess where you're at. Then we're going to have to make a decision. Within those 30 days, and you can easily say within those 30 days, I'm going to commit to follow up with you on a frequent basis to provide feedback for you so that I can help you along the way. They're going to deflect anyways. They're not going to own it and do all that, but you still have to push through the conversation so that you can touch base on everything so they can know that you're setting that up for them to succeed. You want to help them. And the same thing, you want to make sure that you follow up on schedule, on point, and you let them know during your follow-up whether or not it's a yes or no. Yes, you're doing it, or no, you're not. Because in that scenario where the employee's not owning anything, it's critical, the same thing, that you're providing a yes or no, black and white assessment of their progressing. And in that scenario where you're meeting with them, you've got to deploy some of those micromanagement tactics, because if not, in both scenarios, we have an employee that owns their shortcomings and one that doesn't. They have to leave that meeting knowing that they have a commitment, either themselves or they've been placed on an expectation commitment from their boss, but they have to leave that meeting with one or the other. They cannot leave without that meeting without anything. And you've got to make sure that you control that conversation so that that happens within that, because that's really, really important. Because the thing also that you have, that maybe you're not aware, is that your other employees are watching you to see how you handle this. And they're making a determination whether or not you're effective or not effective, right? And that's how you build culture and how you set the example for the employees and how you manage the scenario. So again, I hope that helps. If you have any questions, put them in the comments.